welcome to the food chain video about butternut squash. So now that it's fall, we're getting a lot of butternut squash in from our local farms. So this is a quick tutorial on how to dice your butternut. The first thing is we washed our squash because when it comes from a farm, it often comes in with dirt and debris from the field on it. So you want to give it a good wash before you get ready to cut it. Otherwise, all of that debris will get on your cutting board and get mixed up in your squash. So give it a good rinse. Now, the squash actually has two parts. So this is called the neck and this is called the bulb. And then you've got your stem end. This is where it's actually connected to the plant. And then this is the bottom, and that was actually where the flower formed. So the first thing we want to do is, right now our squash is round and rolly, which is not the best for cutting. So we're going to make some flat ends. We're going to cut off the top. We're going to cut off the bottom, and then we're going to separate the neck and the bulb. And if you notice, I rotate that as I'm cutting it. That makes it easier so I don't have to be able to cut all the way down through in one go. You want to have a decent sized knife and you want it to be pretty sharp. Now, there's two different things you can do with this. You can either roast this whole just as it is and then scoop it out to make butternut squash puree, or if you want to dice it, we can include it with our dicing. But what we're going to do first is peel these. Now, some places will tell you to use a vegetable peeler. I prefer peeling by knife because it allows you to peel off the inside layer and the outside layer at the same time. So if you use a vegetable peeler, a lot of times you end up with that light color and you have to go back over the same spot 4 or 5 times to get all of it off, which takes a long time. So I prefer just using a knife and cutting down around the squash while it's laying flat and exposing that bright orange flesh all the way around. It's a lot faster this way. Now, butternut squash, you'll notice as you're cutting it, once you cut the surface will actually start to look wet. So there's kind of a sap that comes out of butternut squash. It will coat your hands and kind of make them a little bit sticky and dye them a yellowish orange. So I like to wear gloves when I'm processing butternut squash. Otherwise, your hands can end up kind of tacky and have a film on it that takes a little while to get off. If you don't have gloves at home, however, after a few washes with hot water and soap, that film will come off. Your hands won't be stained permanently. So we just use our knife and go all the way around each section of the butternut and making sure we're keeping our non-cutting hand fingers nice and curved and away from our blade, and using pressure down on the squash so that it doesn't slide out from under us while we're cutting it. And this is also the time when, if there's any blemishes in the squash, you can cut those off as well. So you want to have all that nice bright inner flesh exposed, not too much of the light stuff that's directly underneath the skin. Now, for this middle piece, you'll then cut it in half like this, and that'll expose all the seeds, just like if you've ever carved a pumpkin. These are the same plant family. It looks very much like the inside of a pumpkin. You can use a spoon to carve out all of the stringy stuff and those seeds. You can save the seeds for planting in your garden. It may not be a perfectly true butternut squash because squashes easily cross-pollinate, so it might turn out to be a different kind of squash when you plant it, but it will be some kind of winter squash if you plant it. They're not really big enough like pumpkin seeds for roasting and eating, but you can try. They won't be as flavorful. They'll be a little more chewy. But if you want to roast them, they're still perfectly safe to eat. So once we've got all of the seeds and everything removed. All of this can also be composted if you have a compost, or just tossed. It doesn't make a very good vegetable stock. So with the bottom part, it's kind of uneven. So what I actually like to do is stand it up on whichever side is bigger on the flat side and cut down long ways first. And that gives you kind of these, and it gives you one section like this. So I'll cut this one into the long strips. And then cut across to get my dice. And then these ones, you're just gonna get some uneven pieces. So I'll usually cut the outsides off first and put those together. So those get me the most even dice possible out of the funky shape of the bottom. And then the inner parts, you can just kind of trim off the parts that are super thin and funky, and then just dice around there. So once again, it's like for this size squash, I'm making 3 cuts there, dicing the outside piece by itself. Slippy and thinner. So be careful when you're cutting the stacks, and you can always, if you don't feel confident in your knife holding skills, or your knife isn't very sharp, you can just cut one piece at a time as well. So you could just trim these off and cut them individually if that feels more comfortable for you and where you're at. So then for this one, it's hard to cut it evenly if you do it this whole length. So I'll actually usually cut it again in the middle right here and make 2 little blocks. And then with that, using the flat side, you're cutting down. You're making these planks. And then you can make stacks and then cut along the stack, one direction and then the other. And that's going to give you a nice good dice for your butternut. And with these you can then roast them. You can toss them in some oil or butter. You can season them savory and go with garlic and chili and cumin and salt and black pepper. Or you can go sweet and toss them with a little bit of honey or brown sugar, some pecans, and still a little bit of salt. And either way is super delicious. That's one of the great things about butternut squash, is that it's very versatile. For the recipe that we're sending today, you can actually do some sweet and some savory if you want to try both. So you can make a sweet batch to go on top of your oatmeal this week, and then you can make a savory batch to go with your butternut squash macaroni and cheese. So either way, it's going to be super delicious, and you can actually eat it plain. Some places will actually shave it and eat it raw, so it's perfectly safe to eat raw as well, although it doesn't really have as much of the flavor and the sugars developed. But either way, it's a very tasty and nutritious vegetable that goes well mixed into almost any winter dish. I really like it in, besides butternut squash macaroni and cheese, I really love it mixed into my warm chilies and things like that. Lots of soups are good with it, and then you can also make it into a soup all by itself. And there you go, diced butternut squash.